We love Zencaster because it allows us to record the audio for our podcast and create the video segments we use for our weekly Sister Scoop episodes. Zencaster has helped us make content capture simple.
It's now super easy to record a podcast with Zencaster. Log in using your browser and start recording a high-quality podcast right away. Record studio quality sound and up to 4K video with your guests, and feel a sense of zen knowing Zencaster's multi-layered backups ensure you always have your recordings in the highest quality, even if the connection is unstable.
If you've thought about podcasting before and realized that you need a lot of different tools and services, those days are over. With Zencaster's all-in-one podcasting platform, you can create your podcast in one place and distribute it to Spotify, Apple, and other major destinations.
Just go to zencastr.com/pricing and use our code SistersAssembled, and you'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencaster paid plan. We want you to have the same easy experiences we do for all of our podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story.
Katie and I are always hungry, and one snack we both love is beef jerky. That's why we're so excited to tell you about one of our favorite jerky brands, Matt Hat Jerky.
Matt Hat's delicious taste makes it a great snack, and the variety of flavors, including original, black truffle, and my personal favorite, roasted garlic, means there's a flavor for everyone. Plus, it's local to the area where we grew up in, which we just love.
Use the link in the show notes below to get some Matt Hat Jerky for yourself, and make sure to use our coupon code SistersAssembled for 10% off. Hello and welcome to Sisters Assembled, your home for all things MCU. And we are continuing our discussion of the Falcon and the Winter Soldier this week as part of our Marvel Replay series. So there is, as I always say, but this week there really is quite a bit to talk about. I'm going to turn it over to Katie because we are dealing with the aftermath of that last little bit of episode 4 and really the whole show ratcheting up as we get prepared for the finale, which we'll cover next week. So, Katie, over to you.
Let's start with that last little bit, because that's really where the episode kicks itself off, right? Right on the heels of what just happened in the square, public execution, literally. So I think I had so many thoughts, and I'm just going to walk you guys through my thought process as I'm watching this scene, which I did like about an hour and a half ago. First, annoyance, because I was like, stop making Bucky look like he can't take on this newbie super soldier. Goes back to my point from last episode where I talk about them nerfing Bucky for no apparent reason. 2, John Walker, unhinged man right there.
I watched it the night before. And I was like, wow, I have a short-term memory. So if I'm going to watch this the night before, I need to take notes. One of the things that I wrote down was the brutality of the fight scene. Like, I forgot how
it's nasty.
Yeah.
John's going for the kill.
Yeah. I mean, multiple times against both Bucky and Sam. I mean, he races the shield over Sam's head at least once, if not twice, to do exactly what he had just done in the square. But this time to Sam, who we all obviously love. But not only that, if you're going to look at it from like a PR perspective, Sam is an Avenger. So you've done one boo-boo by killing that man in public, and now you're going to kill an Avenger in private and be like, this is all going to make it better? Dude. My second note was Walker screaming, and I quote, "I am Cap, completely unhinged." When he is up on top of Sam and he's about to bring the shield down on Sam's head and he screams that, I literally was like, dude, you have lost your grip on reality. You are just like not even really, I don't even know, but the look in his eyes was scary. Like, yeah. Kudos to Wyatt Russell in that moment. The acting, I mean, the way he screams it, of course, but the acting he does with his face and those eyes.
Well, mind you, he has a mask on the whole time.
Yeah.
Like, that's not even his full face that's being exposed in that moment to actually emote. We're seeing it through the Captain America head shield, you know? So it's like, I agree. Like, kudos to him, seriously, because it made me sit there and I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Like, dear God.
If we thought you had gone off the deep end last episode, you are now swimming deeper. You're in the Mariana Trench, my dude. Like, you are gone.
Correct. And now I will say, And I don't want to detour us too far into John because there's so much else that happens in this episode. And weirdly enough, our conversations tend to focus a lot on John. So I just want to move through his storyline in this episode specifically. I mean, the thing is he does such a good job as an actor because in one scene, you had me sitting there being like, you're the worst. I'm hoping Bucky smashes your head in. Like, just be done. And his next scene, which is his unofficial trial, because there's really not a trial being done. They've made their decisions. They're doling out punishment.
Yeah.
I felt nothing but sympathy because he represents the veterans that have been left behind by their country in different capacities, but that have been left behind. And in this case specifically, when he is sitting there saying, I've done everything you told me to do, I've followed all your orders, I am exactly what you made me. And there, his country turned their back on him. And I think that was so impactful. And he does such an amazing job performing that in a way that, like I said, I mean, not even maybe 5 minutes ago in the show, I literally was hoping Bucky would go Winter Soldier on him. And now I'm sitting here and I feel genuinely bad because he made a mistake. He did. And I do think it was brought up at some point, and I don't remember who exactly said it, but somebody kind of said, had it not been so public, the impact of this would have been different. But regardless, he pretty much hit the pinnacle of being a public figure in the military nonetheless, and made a mistake, and instead of getting any leeway, even just okay fine, he was being stripped of being Captain America. What I really was gutted by for him was the fact that he was being stripped of everything, even down to his benefits as a veteran. He was being stripped of his benefits, which is a right to every person who serves.
Y'all, when they said that word, and not all of this audience is American, but you probably understand the plight of the American healthcare system. It's bad. If you don't have insurance, you could potentially lose basically your entire financial security on one medical emergency. That's the state of the American healthcare system. One of the benefits, to Katie's point, of being a veteran is to have those lifelong benefits, for lack of better term, but to have that coverage essentially for the rest of your life as recompense for your service. Not only does he lose that, to Katie's point, he loses basically his service record and his good name. And now, yes, he did murder someone, but I think, to Katie's point, what he represents, putting that aside, what John represents in this moment is more important than his action. He represents all those veterans, and you see that moment where the veil drops for John, where he really thought that because of his service and because of his record, this would not be as bad as it was. And you realize, or he realizes, how quickly the American government is turning on him and essentially making him the scapegoat, because he said it. I am what you made me. Everybody who picked him is also responsible for this. Everybody who didn't check and balance him at any point and gave him free reign to go anywhere is also responsible for this. But yet, to save their own butts, they are going to strip him of everything, and they are going to make him the problem. What he represents in this moment is it makes it so complicated, because, to your point, you feel some type of way about him, at the end of episode 4, beginning of episode 5, but then you have to take that step back and say, actually, he's a metaphor for a much larger problem in American society.
Well, and that doesn't even bring into the factor of mental health in veterans and to those who serve. When we open that door and add it to everything you just said, this all also comes down to the fact that he even is talking about in episode 4 the things that they had to do.
Yep.
And we are not told what that is, but it's heavily implied that it was off book. I'm sure there aren't a lot of record for exactly what was happening, but what they were told to do in the times that they served. And I think it also brings into that, I mean, let's be real. Lamar dying in that moment in battle and the direct effect of John going after that man and killing him, regardless of whether or not it was in the middle of the square or not. Because again, at the end of the day, a lot of that action also comes down to we feel the way we feel because it was done with the shield
Right.
and because of the symbolism of that. At the end of the day, emotionally, and we're not even factoring in the serum, emotionally, the guy broke.
Yeah.
Because that was his right hand man, his best friend. They served together for such a long time. And I'm sure he was probably a big reason, if not the reason, Lamar was even there because he wanted him to be his partner. And so all of these feelings come rushing in. And again, not even factoring in the serum. All this pain, all this suffering, he makes a bad decision, fine. And then they sit here, and the only thing that they have to do is punish him beyond anything else. There is no factor for the fact that his own emotional well being is not being even considered because he is a foot soldier to the US government at this point. And he was a foot soldier who messed up. And to your point, is a scapegoat, and that's all they need him to be. And so it is so interesting because John is such a hard character to like
Mm-hmm.
for a lot of reasons, but a lot of the reasons he's hard to like is a systematic reason. The system he was devoted to, that he grew up in, that he committed his entire life to, has created him to be how he is. And to your point, even with the Captain America stuff, no checks and balances, letting him just run amok, letting him just do whatever the heck he wants to do and have pretty much full authority and just, hey, Cap said this, we're doing this now. Like all of that is not on him for the fact that he was put on a pedestal that nobody wanted to control or nobody cared to control until it was too late.
Yeah, exactly. And I do want to circle back really quickly to the mental health conversation because I think that's really important. And it all ties back, or it should tie back to the fact that what did they take away? His benefits, his ability to get mental health care moving forward. Or, he's going to have to find a different way to cover that or pay for it. We see in the Thunderbolts flashbacks of him with his infant child just completely spaced out. This is a man who has extreme PTSD, who is completely checked out of his life, probably depression, and you can't tell me that he is getting any sort of help for that. Well, it doesn't help that the military just stripped away his benefits.
Well, and beyond that, everything they just did leads him to the path he goes down the Thunderbolts.
Yep.
And I mean, obviously we try not to get too far ahead of ourselves here. We are replaying this because we didn't get to do it as a podcast before. So we're kind of we always try our best to like not get too, far down the road. But the reason he has his found family and works the way it does in Thunderbolts is because they all have their own baggage. And unfortunately, this is his that he's bringing. And he does suck for the first 20 minutes of the Thunderbolts too. He's not great. But he is able to find people who understand in different capacities and support him.
Yeah.
It is nice to see that ends up being the path he goes down, including the fact that Bucky's one of them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a lot of commonality between them in different ways, but there is a lot of overlap. And so I think from a John hater / semi stan after the Thunderbolts, like I appreciate the journey that he goes on, but this is that moment of just life ruining. And that scene you're referring to in the Thunderbolts, it all comes really from this.
Right.
I mean, as you listed, just the mental health situation that I'm sure he is in, but then on top of the fact that like just besides that, the facts of the matter are he's lost his best friend. He probably feels the responsibility of that, both for why he was there and also that he didn't stop it at any point.
Yep.
He couldn't stop it. And then everything being stripped of him and him being essentially made to be a fool by the government.
Yeah.
Because even when he's going to his hearing, if you will, I mean, he's being heckled and screamed at and everything else. And listen, as a Cap fan, I get it. But like from a perspective of like just understanding that this is a person who made a mistake and also should never have taken the serum, but that also adds to all of this. Like that is why he goes down such a negative path, and that's where he ends up. And it is very hard because I think, I mean, we learn his wife leaves him.
Yeah.
He literally hits rock bottom after all of this. And as much as I hate him throughout this show because he just becomes arrogant and just honestly, he was just psychotic before, so then like the serum really adds to that problem. But like as much as I cannot stand him, nobody deserves the path that John ends up being put on.
Yeah, he's definitely a very nuanced and complicated character, and I think, you made the subtle joke that we kind of end up talking about him in every episode. But and not to say that the other characters in this show aren't, because I think every character has such a unique and important journey in this show. But one of the reasons we have spent so much time on John is because of the journey that he goes on, and having seen the Thunderbolts, we understand where this all leads, right? And so we can kind of see, to your point, like he hits that absolute pinnacle of being Captain America, and then almost within a week or two hits the absolute floor of what he does in episode 4, and obviously being stripped of his titles. And then even in the end credit scene, like you see that man making his own shield, like he is just unwell.
Yeah.
And so that continues. Obviously it costs him his marriage, and Valentina even makes a joke that was the best decision he ever made, and then he loses that too. And so like the journey that he goes on, I think is one that is so fascinating to watch, and he's a character I'm really excited to see in future appearances, because I think I would like to see how this continues to evolve for him and how he continues to grow, because he did a lot in the Thunderbolts.
Yeah, definitely. But speaking of other characters, we need to obviously talk about Sam,
Yes.
one of our title characters, but he has probably the bigger progression of the character of the two title characters. He probably has the bigger progression of it, or of himself as a character throughout the show, because he takes on the mantle, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the whole thing. And they really save a lot of Bucky makes a lot of progress, and we'll get to that, but they save a lot of like the payout with him for the Thunderbolts, I think.
Yes.
So, Sam in this episode, I think we just see a lot of different sides of Sam. A deeper side, a more, I don't want to say almost giving up Sam, because that's not true, but I do think this is that moment where we start to see Sam really facing the struggle of the shield is once again in my hands. Now I have to decide if I'm picking it up or not.
Yeah. And I think what is really interesting about this episode as well is we really get a deep understanding of what his hesitance was the first time. It's heavily implied if you understand or are watching for the themes of the show, but this time you can't get away from it. You have to listen to what he is saying, and you can't, say it's something else. He explicitly lays out, well, sort of Isaiah kind of explicitly lays out why the shield is so complicated for him. And I think that conversation that Sam has with Isaiah, it has so many layers. And look, a full disclaimer and disclosure here, we're going to do our best to kind of talk about these themes, but we are not people of color, so this is not our lived experience, but we're going to do our best to kind of try to speak about it. But I do just want to recognize that, because we can't truly deeply understand what that experience is like, cuz it hasn't been ours. That being said, what I think that conversation between Sam and Isaiah truly represents is this idea of the legacy of America, right? And the shield in a lot of ways really is a physical symbolism of the legacy of America. You have the very whitewashed, sanitized version that is the shield under Steve, that is all rah rah World War II, we're the best country in the world, and there's no place where America has ever erred. We are, the greatest democracy on the planet. You have that version. And then you have the version that Isaiah, never held the shield, but that is much more realistic and nuanced about America in terms of how it treats its own citizens, its role in the world. So I think that conversation really lays it all out in terms of this is the real legacy of America, the real legacy of the Shield. And you can choose to embrace one that is the reality, or you can choose to embrace a legacy that is missing some serious and important pieces of truth. And obviously, the idea behind the show, or the message that you're supposed to get, is you should be understanding the true legacy. There are so many nuances about this America's history, and Isaiah has this really powerful line where he says they're never going to let a black man be Captain America, and no self-respecting black man would ever want to be. In Isaiah's mind, I think Sam taking on that mantle means that he is accepting that sanitized version of history. But I think Sam, who you talked about him almost being defeated in this episode, I think Sam is actually the character who represents so much hope. I think he sees a world where, one, he could be Captain America, and two, where him being Captain America does not mean that he is negating the more challenging parts of American history and the lack of morality within them, but is instead looking to the future and what him being Captain America represents moving forward, and what it could represent to all the young children and what they can see in him, and even just adults as well. But I think especially when you think about his nephews and them being the next generation and things like that. So that conversation is just, I highly recommend, if you haven't watched it in a while, just please do, because I think there's so many conversations that can be had and so many important messages that come out of it.
Yeah, and beyond that conversation, we have a conversation that he has with Sarah, which I think kind of goes off of that, and also and his nephews. You brought up the next generation, and I think there's an impact from his family. And I know at one point Sarah even says, like, are you really going to listen to what he has to say? Because she's essentially saying, like, you of all people have always pushed to do what you believe is the right thing to do, and have broken your own barriers, regardless of if that meant leaving home or staying here. And you wanted to do what was right. So you left, even though, obviously they're dealing with some things back at home, and Sarah's the one who's been in charge of everything. She's like, you wanted to help, you wanted to make a difference, and that's what you did. And so I think it's really interesting too, because it brings into really the idea of who Sam is as a person.
Yeah.
Beyond anything else, who his character is. Literally his character, not like the character of Sam Wilson, but like Sam's character is so, I think maybe hopeful is the right word. And to just correct my statement, when I say defeated, I meant kind of in the Carly and like everything with John front, like literally defeated in that way. That's what I was more so referring to. But yes, I think him as a character represents this hope and this hope for change. And so I think Sarah sitting there and being like, come on now, like this isn't you to sit here and yes, I think that conversation with Isaiah is so important to kind of have that thought of two different mindsets of where they can go in this moment. I think this is the fork in the road of where Sam is at. And it is the idea of what Isaiah pretty much said of any self-respecting black man wouldn't pick up that shield, because it would perpetuate the same problems we've always had. They're not going to respect you, and you're just giving into what you like. You're giving into this idea that's not ever going to give it back into you, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And to the people who will never give it back to you the same way they gave it to Steve. And then I think, on the flip side, it is Sam's idea of what that future could look like. I think his nephews, as I said, really are an impact to him as well. We literally see them playing with the shield. And then when he's having like a training montage, like they're there. And, I think that's that path that he decides to take is what that future can now look like, and what path he can forge for young kids, and especially young kids of color who can now see and this I think was a big conversation as a society we had, especially regarding Black Panther, start to actually see some of the characters that people either relate more to or look like them, and I think we've had that debate talking even about the big three in the first three phases. And yeah, they're all awesome and we love all the people who play them, obviously, but it was very heavily male dominated. We've had a lot of those conversations from the female perspective of what that looks like and how that's changed. And I think again, we had a societal conversation about it with Black Panther coming out and what that did for representation and for culture and everything. So, because I mean, come on, like when Black Panther came out, that was game changing across the board,
Yeah.
just like literally societally. And so I think, that is that fork that he faces. And I think we obviously all know the path he does go down. And he is, as you said, the hope, I think is the best way to say it. And he weighs his options. He does. But I do appreciate Sam as a character because he is just he's also very introspective, which I don't always think we get a lot of from some of our other characters. He's a very interesting character in that way. And it does call back a little bit too to the fact that we met him in the Winter Soldier and he was helping other veterans.
Yeah.
And we'll get to that in a second because that's kind of Bucky's part of this episode. But, he is a brilliant person and he's so in tune with how he feels and with what he thinks is the right move. And that's why Steve chose him. Period. The end.
Yeah, I think you see so much of Sam's integrity come through, right? In this, I mean, Sam has always been a very full of integrity, but I think this episode so much highlights that because going back to what Isaiah said to him, like he could have chosen to give up the shield a second time. His life would in theory be easier, right? He could go back to flying missions, working with the government, but now he's going to step into this mantle right after a man just absolutely obliterated everything it stood for. He's stepping into it as the first Black man to do it, which I'll finish that thought in a second, but I have to get this in. The metaphor in after the fight scene between John, Bucky, and Sam at the beginning of the episode of Sam being the one to try to clean off the shield. Oh my goodness.
That's one of the hardest scenes to watch in this show.
It is. It's tough to watch because you see how heartbroken he is and how guilty he feels because he feels responsible, which I know you love your Bucky, but he contributes to that. That look that he gives to Sam at the end of like, look at what you've done. I mean, Sam didn't make that decision to give the shield to Walker. He thought he was doing the right thing. So, all that to say, I love that scene because I think with the shield because I think it's just there's so many layers to it and the metaphor of him being the one who now has to, and we talked about this last episode, go back and clean up the reputation of the shield, but then add on to that the fact that he is the first Black Captain America. It's going to be more challenging for him to take this route and step into it, but yet that is the route he chooses to go. And that is, to your point, one of the many reasons I think Steve chose him. I think it's the integrity. I think it is that capacity for hope because even in the saddest of moments, we saw Steve always have that hope. He never gave up. It was we'll win together or we'll lose together. And he was always that guy who was going for it. And I think Sam has a lot of those same qualities. And I think because of those similarities, those were the reasons that Steve looked at Sam and said, you are the right person. You will represent this shield well. You will wear it well. And you will bring people the hope and the positivity and the sense of safety that this shield is supposed to represent. Sam has a lot more work to do now than he did if he had just picked up the shield when, Steve had given it to him because of Walker, but he's still going to be able to do that. And we see him in future appearances be able to change that perception. But yeah, to your point, I think he is just such a well-rounded character, someone who has so much nuance and someone who I'm so glad we got to explore him so much more in this show because he has so much depth that he just was not getting in some of his earlier appearances.
Definitely. And I mean, I actually recently just rewatched The Winter Soldier. Nobody's too shocked about that news. And obviously that's Sam's intro, right? Like we don't have Sam before that movie. And I mean, there is a level in which I do think whenever there is a new character introduced, they aren't usually coming out of the gate with depth. Ironically, John is one that did. The way he was written in this show, they really showed his depth and they showed what this character represents and things of that nature. But back in Captain America, the Winter Soldier, that's not true. We got a very I don't want to say one note version of Sam, but that's what,
Surface level.
yeah, we didn't really get too deep into who he was, what he believed in, other than something like, because again, it's Captain America, the Winter Soldier. I mean, right in the title, it tells you the two most prominent characters, and they have Black Widow in it. Like, you had three heavy swingers, if you will, there. So it is kind of interesting to see where he comes and goes, because like as you just said, in other works we really don't have the time to focus on Sam in any capacity to actually read that and see what all of this it comes to fruition to mean. And this show does take the time to actually go into his character. And I think it's also so interesting because Bucky has a line when they're talking that pretty much, and this is kind of their like come together moment fully, but Bucky straight up says, when Steve told me what he was going to do, I don't think either of us thought about what it would be like for a black man to become Captain America.
Such a powerful line.
Such a powerful line. I mean, and it's so true, like on one end, it's like kind of, I remember kind of thinking, well, they didn't think about it because they just saw Sam so equally to everything that they never, I don't think either of them gave the thought, because they would have been like, why wouldn't he make a great Captain America? Like, he's great. He's awesome. He embodies everything Steve has always embodied, and he's such a good person. He's going to make the right choices. So like on that one hand, you're like, cool, you didn't even think about it because you just see him as and his character. But on the flip side of it, the depth of it is like, yeah, there's a lot that goes into this, including and tying it all back together in a bow, what Isaiah highlighted and what really is the meaning behind having somebody of color take on the shield in, I mean, I don't know what present day society exactly it was in the Falcon and Winter Soldier at that point. I think we were somewhere around like 2024, 2025.
I think it was 23, 24, because I don't think it's long after the blip.
Okay, that's what I'm saying though. Like, okay, 2024 was where I like initially landed. Yeah. So like, think about society, think about where we are, even like for us Americans, where we are as a country and things of that nature. So I do think, that was such a powerful line. And it was Bucky's moment, I think, as you referenced at the end of that fight, kind of giving Sam that, like, look what you did kind of look.
Yeah.
I think that was Bucky's way of coming back around and being like, we didn't think about this. I never thought about it. And even throughout this whole process of, John having the shield and everything we've been through, I wasn't thinking about why this was so hard for you and why this was weighing on you, and the decision to take that shield or not take the shield was a decision, not just an immediate, of course, as we've seen with several other mantles getting passed on since.
Yeah, I think that is so true in terms of it almost being like an apology from Bucky to be recognizing, hey, we never had to think about the extra weight that it could carry because we have the privilege that we don't have to think about it. And it's him kind of recognizing the privilege that he has as a white man, where to what you were saying, Sam has so much more that's involved if he were to take the shield take the shield and the mantle of Captain America. And so I think that line holds kind of two purposes, right? It's that I understand you now, and I recognize, or I understand where you're coming from. I recognize that I made a mistake and I am sorry, but also as kind of a cue to the audience of like, yeah, if you're not a person of color, you're not going to understand the struggle. You can try to empathize, and that's great, but you're never truly going to understand the struggle. And I think it's actually really important that Sam goes to his community of Isaiah, of his sister, to be able to kind of hear those two sides of the argument, which he also has internally, to have those validated so that he can then understand where his own gut is telling him to go from people who truly understand his experience in a way that Sam and Bucky just will never I'm sorry, in the way that Steve and Bucky just will never be able to do.
Right. Yeah. I really think, I mean, there's a lot that happens in that conversation between Bucky and Sam, but I think, and this is me coming as a Bucky fan, I think that's the most important part that comes out of it.
Yeah, I agree.
And yeah, I mean, Sam has some amazing lines towards Bucky to really push him to also pretty much be like, what's the quote? Well, I can't quote it exactly because we don't curse on the pod, but like, get your butt up and work. It's like, it's essentially that. He literally was like, put the work in, bro. Like,
Yeah.
actually, if you want to be better, you want to make your amends, then actually do it. You're like skimming the surface, pretending that this means stuff. It doesn't. It's not going to make you feel better. Like, they have a great conversation about that. But Bucky's line for Sam is more important than anything else said.
Oh, 100%. I totally agree. I do, though, want to give Bucky a little bit of time here because I think,
Of course. Oh, I wasn't not going to let that happen. Come on
right,
now.
right. But I do think that conversation, especially that he has with Sam in this episode, is so important for his growth. And I think one of the real bangers that Sam says, and you actually can see his I counseled veteran hat on in this conversation so much, is when he is talking about Bucky making the amends, and he's like, you are making these amends in the hope that you will feel better, that it will make you feel better. It's like, that's backwards, buddy. You need to make them feel better so that the ghosts, are not haunting you, for lack of better term. And so I think that just kind of flips Bucky's entire mindset. And you can actually see him, thinking about his friend at the beginning of the episode when Sam talks about, you're the only person who can truly bring some of these people closure. And you're like, yeah, dude, like, you are too afraid to tell this man what happened to his son, but you are literally the only person alive who knows. And so you said earlier in the episode about how a lot of Bucky's work is done in the Thunderbolts, but I think the foundation for him being able to do that work is really laid by Sam, calling him out on his half butt attempts to make amends. It was really hard for me there not to
I
actually say
know.
the real term there, but his, not full attempts to make amends, and say to him, hey, you need to do it for them, and that's going to, in a roundabout way, end up helping you by bringing them closure. And I think through that, then we get to see Bucky moving forward with his life. He then becomes a senator, and then he goes on to be in the Thunderbolts. That is so much of what Sam gives to him through his advice, and through, honestly, what I would imagine is his experience working with veterans. And I think that as much as that scene is about, or as much as those lines are about Bucky and his journey, it also speaks so much, again, to Sam's character and who he is as a person as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I definitely think what's always been interesting about Bucky, I mean, what's not, but what's always been interesting about him.
You are shameless.
Listen, am I ever gonna say anything bad against this man? No. He is one of the best characters, if not the best character to exist in the MCU, as far as I'm concerned.
Strong words.
Yeah, and I'll stand 10 toes down. I'm behind them too. Don't worry. But no, what's always been very interesting about him is he is also a story and poster child of mental health and the symbolism that he has of, PTSD and trauma and things of that nature from a very strong level. Like, let's be real. Like, I don't think most of us are going to come across somebody who's had the experience that Bucky's had.
Yeah.
I would hope to think, that doesn't exist in the world. I don't know though. But to that degree of just horribleness that he's gone through. And then I think he kind of brings up a lot, like the thing that he's brought up throughout this show and then brings it up again in this conversation is he's alone.
Yeah.
And this is one of those moments that I once again want to like absolutely obliterate Steve Rogers as a person because she's not that worth it, but go off. Whatever. You kissed her once. Okay. I just like.
And the soapbox returns. I was wondering how many episodes we could go without you getting up on it.
God, I can't. But it's in this moment that it's so upsetting because it's like he literally sits here and he's like, I had that shield and I have his book.
Yeah.
Like, that's all I got. I finally am free, and he left. And now I don't know how to do this life. And I've missed 80 years of my life. I don't know what's happening. I have all this trauma. I mean, he went through a lot having Zemo back in the picture. That was really triggering for him throughout the whole thing. I mean, we have a great scene between the two of them when Zemo obviously gets arrested, but what a powerful scene.
Oh, when he drops the bullets.
I mean, and it is truly one of the most impactful scenes, Bucky scenes, because it is literally him saying, I am not him anymore.
Yeah, I'm not a killer.
Yeah, and as much as he says it physically and like verbally is telling people, that moment, especially because Zemo throughout the entirety of the show that he's in it, just keeps going back to the fact that he is, though. He's the Winter Soldier. Even in that scene, he's like, you're trained to kill, so do it. That's
He's
your
egging him
job.
on.
Yeah. And Bucky sits there and shows him that's not why I'm here. That's not who I am. That's not my path. And so I think that's just so valuable. But at the same time, I mean, again, he's alone and he's struggling to fit into this new society after all the things he's been through. I mean, we see him trying therapy. We see him, I mean, not trying, it's court mandated, part of his pardon, but he's in therapy and all of these other things that he's trying to do. And he is trying to make these amends, even though, he's not really going about it the right way. He's trying and he's trying to do all of this stuff. But he really, even down to like when he first appears, he's like, oh, I'll go back to my hotel. And Sam's like, or you'll just stay here. Like what? Because he doesn't know how to kind of create a regular relationship and have a friend and things of that nature. Like these are all things that he used to do in the 1940s.
Yeah.
The world isn't the 1940s anymore. And he's not James Buchanan Barnes anymore the way he was. So it's like, there's just so much about him as a character that is just so interesting. And I do think pairing him with Sam at the end, which all always made sense. Again, like Sam's introduced in The Winter Soldier. Like they are not unknown to each other. They pretty much everything they've ever been in, including this show, has featured the other one. Even in Cat 4, Bucky appears. I would know, freaked out. Best cameo ever. Like I literally was like, thank God. But like, there is not one without the other pretty much since Sam came into the MCU, because obviously Bucky was here a little longer, but it does really show the impact that somebody like Sam can have in bringing Bucky not only out of his shell, but in making him feel comfortable again and helping him through this journey of just finding who he is now. And that's what a lot of that conversation between the two of them were talking about too, in establishing how he can actually move on from the things he's been through and the trauma that he's endured.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head when you were talking about isolation, right? Because one of the worst things that you can do when you're dealing with a mental health challenge many times is isolate, because having that community around you to help support you is so important. And I think honestly, that's one of the major themes of Thunderbolts. So it's very fitting that Bucky was a part of that, because before he had the Thunderbolts, he had Sam and his whole community was Sam. But that didn't matter because he was there for him and he helped him through, this transitional period as he was looking to find himself and figure out, what is the next step for him. And Sam was there, hugging him all the way through it. And that's so important to have that. And so I love this scene, but it also makes me so sad because of where they are now in the timeline and what happens at the end of Thunderbolts. Because
And for what reason? Like, for what reason?
I totally agree. I think, we both were kind of frustrated by that watching the Thunderbolts, and then having rewatched this show, it's like opened that wound, poured a ton of salt on it, and then added hot sauce and was like, yeah, you're still really annoyed because this sucks.
Can I kind of share a hot take though?
Go ahead.
So, obviously, up until Endgame, I think it was kind of a coin toss on who would take up the mantle, because Bucky and Sam both are Captain America in the comics, right?
Right.
And they're both there. They're both actively, fighting parts of the Avengers, whatever. So they're both on the board. Obviously, in Endgame, Sam is given the shield, but as a Bucky stan, I can actively tell you, Bucky has used the shield in every movie he was in,
Including this show.
I'm getting there. So, I mean, and I'm talking even down to the very first one, the first Avenger on the train. He is there holding that shield not long before he falls off it. So, he, even the Winter Soldier, he wields it. He wields it in Civil War. And to your point, he wields it once again, blatantly wields it in this show against John, ironically.
Yeah.
So I think that as a Bucky fan, that had led a lot of us to believe he was going to get the shield. And now I do think there's a lot of healing he has to go through. I don't disagree that he shouldn't have gotten it. I do think Sam should have. But I think that had led a lot to believe that was the reasoning. Like they were kind of like hinting towards it the whole time. He once again wields it in this show. And now the reason I'm saying this is because you have now essentially set up for the two of them to be their respective Captain Americas on their teams to go head to head against each other. And a part of me is like, was that always kind of semi the plan? Was to have the two of them almost duke it out for that reason? Like, and I'm not saying because Bucky's fighting to be Captain America, but just they were both on the board the whole time. They were both options. You gave a lot of hints that it could go towards Bucky. It didn't, and that's cool. Like no. Again, I love Sam, but it is kind of interesting now that we do have them on opposing sides. I mean, they both represent Steve and Captain America in two very different ways.
Yeah, I mean, that is one take. I don't personally subscribe to it. I just think they're reheating their nachos in doing like an Avengers versus Avengers situation.
I'm trying to make them feel smarter. Let me give them maybe some credit.
I mean, that's fine if that's what you want to do.
Well, let me think that the reason they had Bucky wield the shield in every single property he's ever been in is significant, okay?
I understand that this is very important to you emotionally, so I'm just going to let this go.
Okay.
I have no further comment.
I'm just saying.
I understand.
I'm just putting it out
I
there.
understand that you are deeply emotionally invested in this conversation.
I am.
And I am just gonna choose to leave this here. You all as an audience can decide how you feel about Caitlin's thoughts. And that's great. And have that conversation with us. That's why we're here. On another note, two other things that I want to point out that were Easter egged in this episode, and one of them isn't even an Easter egg, it's just she's here. Valentina makes her debut. Well, actually this actually would have been the first time we've ever seen her, because she does not appear in Black Widow until later in 2021. So that is the first time that we've seen her. We obviously know how interconnected her and John's stories will be moving forward. And then we do get another mention of the raft, which is probably going to just be sunk in the narrative storyline of the larger MCU, which is unfortunate, though it did make another appearance in the most recent Captain America, so we'll see. But just two other Easter eggs in this episode in particular that, are interesting to have.
It is interesting to add about the raft, because when I heard that line, I was like, oh, had they not done the Thunderbolts the way they did, which I'm not going to complain, but putting Zemo on there, we find out Red Hulk goes on there.
Yeah.
Like, just some of the pieces, and the irony of it is like neither of them ended up on the Thunderbolts team, but like, which is really weird because Zemo is like kind of the leader of the Thunderbolts, but it is kind of interesting to know those factors it like almost looked like they were starting to be placed, but then they were like, never mind.
Yeah, but as we mentioned last episode, you can't put Zemo and John in the same room and think that that's going to work well.
No, I mean, I agree, but it is kind of interesting to see how that like looks like it almost was being put in there to be set up, and then it never did. Like, it just was like, oh, okay. And to our knowledge, Zemo's still hanging out there.
Yeah, as far as I know.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, like, we haven't seen him since, so.
No. The only other thing I want to talk about very briefly, because we actually didn't really get a lot because it was all setting up for the finale, which is Carly and the Flag Smashers. This was a lead up episode, which is why we had the character development we did during this episode, because obviously we're going to have the big battle in episode 6.
Boom, boom, smash, smash.
Smash, smash. And so our antagonists were not as present, just because, again, we have to kind of wrap up some of the character development because we aren't going to have the same amount of time in the finale. That being said, obviously they're going for their big move. We've seen her become more and more radicalized and quite frankly become a self-fulfilling prophecy according to Zemo, which I mean she kind of did. Like it was, maybe not where she would have always gone, but that's where she did, and at the end of the day, whatever. What I just want to bring attention to, which is something I also forgot. I remember the battle. I remember there being this whole, like I remember the premise of the battle and everything of that nature. I did not remember the whole movement coming in behind and being a part of it the way that it was. And I actually really appreciated that part of it because I think the entire show, we get like bits of it with people helping throughout. They're helping put Carly in a home, give her housing and food and things as she needs hiding and whatever else. But this is the first time we're actually seeing the call to arms essentially and the following that gathers. And that's just in New York, like the ones that we just saw in that moment. But they literally are calling upon their followers because they're like, this is the big one. And I think it is very interesting because the topic of this entire show, beyond Sam and Bucky, has always been based off of coming back from the blip and what that looks like and how people are displaced and homelessness is coming back and all these other things, which has been a very interesting topic, and it has made Carly a hard antagonist to be mad about because even Sam says, I agree with you.
Yeah.
You're not wrong in any of the things you're saying and in your messaging. You're not wrong. And so it is very interesting because now we're seeing the numbers. We're seeing the people rise up. And it makes me excited because I don't remember exactly how it all goes, but I do know, like I said, I remember the premise, but I don't remember how the whole battle goes. So I'm excited to watch it again because this is one of the only times I think in the MCU we see this happen like this, that your everyday citizen is following this whole movement essentially. And the movement is the antagonist.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a good thing to point out because I think you're right. You get to see for probably the first time, other than maybe the bank scene when we first meet the Flag Smashers,
Yeah.
the true scale of the movement and the support that they have. And I think, it's so interesting because you actually do in this episode get to see a little bit of the conversations happening within the GRC. And you see people who are saying, okay, but we're not prepared to provide resources for the displaced. We can't move them because we can't actually provide for them. And then you have the people who just simply don't care. And I think it's so heartening in some ways to see people rise up for not only themselves, but for other people and for the good and just basic human rights of other individuals.
Yeah, like you can't be mad at them.
Right, right. And it's so powerful. And I think I too don't exactly remember how this ends. I do remember one thing, but I don't remember how the movement kind of is resolved. Not resolved is the wrong word, but like how that narrative thread itself is resolved.
Yeah, I don't either.
Yeah, but I do think, it is something, there's something to be said for kind of grassroots movement and people stepping up for themselves and their neighbors.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I said too, it's so interesting because they're supposed to be the bad guys, but they're really not. They're really not. It is something that I think is brings a very interesting perspective because again, you're going in for one of the first times. I mean, there have been other antagonists, I'm thinking of specifically Killmonger, who have obviously had a point, right?
Yeah.
Like had a reason and it was clear and it wasn't Tony Stark made me mad. Like it was literally like a legit following and reason to why he was doing what he was doing that made him hard to be mad about, which is why he's one of the best antagonists we've ever had.
Correct.
And now I think the Flag Smashers get a bad rep a lot of the time when people talk about this show. But I would have to argue that I actually think they're a very strong antagonist.
Yes.
I think people get lost in they're super soldiers and blah blah blah. Like I think they get lost in the nitty-gritty stupid crap of the MCU itself and not so much the messaging and the reason behind what they're doing and why they have this movement and
100%.
why they are, growing in numbers and they're actually a prominent antagonist because quite frankly, I'm sure and I'm sure I speak for both of us by saying we'd probably be following them if we were in the MCU. We'd be like, heck yeah, they got the right idea. This government agency, as you pointed out, some of these people don't even care. The one guy literally was like, why don't we just send in our armies now and clean them up?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think they're a very interesting antagonist, actually. And I think unfortunately they get the rep they get because everybody gets caught up on the super soldier perspective, as everything always does. But I truly think from their reasoning and to why they are doing everything they're doing, it's powerful. It's real. I mean, I agree with them wholeheartedly.
100%. I think it'll be interesting to talk about the resolution of the group or the resolution of the storyline of the group next episode. And it's something that I'm very much looking forward to because you're right. There's a lot of nuance there in terms of messaging versus methodologies and where you kind of draw that line. And I think that's, it's an interesting topic to try to speak about and analyze for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
And with that, I think that we have covered the major topics of the Falcon and the Winter Soldier episode 5. We will be back with episode 6 next week. Make sure that you are following on your podcast platform of choice so that you are aware of when episode 6 comes out. You can also check out our website and our Buy Me a Coffee, both of which are linked in the show notes below.
You guys can also give us a follow on all of our socials, which are also in the show notes down below. And as we've kind of already teed up, next week we will be finishing our replay series with Where It Has Last Stands, because I mean, we can theoretically go back and do X-Men. We unclear on how that will shake out. But with catching up officially of where we started as a podcast, which was with Loki. So we will be finishing not just the replay, but obviously the Falcon and the Winter Soldier with episode 6, which is kind
Crazy.
of yeah.
I can't believe we're here.
I know. It took literally the entire time that we've been doing the podcast so far.
But also that means we covered like over 10 years worth of content.
We did.
Which wasn't so hard when it was just movies.
No, the shows became a little hard. But we've only really had to do 2. So
that is
to be fair.
That is true.
Yeah. Yeah. So make sure you guys are joining us next week because, again, we'll be wrapping up the Falcon and Winter Soldier, but we will be wrapping up our, at least as it stands right now, replay series. So make sure you guys are listening to all of that as it comes out. And as always, Marvel just blew your mind, so let's talk about it.